The following is an excerpt from The Boon, Thoughts of a Schizophrenic in Remission by Eugene Uttley. Hello. These days, as I have meetings of the mind with family and friends and people online, I fairly often share a little bit about what God has come to mean to me. Pause for effect. Do I intuit a stifled groan? Like politics, divinity is commonly held to be either the conversational equivalent of one's undergarments, or a tired old horse of a subject to beat on, or, alternately, a somewhat perilous topic to pursue. Some folks like to think they've got the holy ins and outs just about right, and might not want to hear anything that diverges from or goes contrary to their beliefs. What's more, many people feel that spreading the word about how it all works is a great good deed, if not a duty. So it's likely they're more interested in converting you to their way of thinking than they are in hearing yours. Makes for some conflict, thus the peril. When I say some folks like to think they're right, and many people want to spread the word, I don't excuse myself. As I started out by saying, it's not infrequently that I find myself sharing my own personal gospel. Gospel, noun, Merriam-Webster definition 4, something accepted or promoted as infallible truth or as a guiding principle or doctrine. I'll settle for the guiding principle part of the definition. Recently, in response to an online post from a man who said he couldn't help but blame God for his hardships in life, I wrote, God is like a code word, which means oneness with everything. I told him that if he points the finger of blame at God, it's like pointing at himself in a mirror. Now, many might be inclined to call that view some existential, Eastern-influenced cockamamie flapdoodle. But as Isaiah 1:18 says, "Come now, let us reason together." In other words, please hear me out a little further. I have applied my reason, and I have heeded my emotions, and this is the conclusion at which I have arrived. That what God means to me is connectedness with the source, with the whole. To approach this understanding in more cosmic terms, it seems clear to me now that there is no place where the universe stops and I begin. Likewise, there is no place where I stops and the rest of the universe begins. Rather, there is a constant circulation, as of breath or of blood, of energy and matter, even of awareness, spirit or soul. Like a trade wind or an ocean current, this movement stirs inanimate and animate alike. Formed and perpetually reforming through the action of this force, each of us is constantly accruing and eroding, ever in a process of change. And in this flux, this connectedness, this oneness with all, with the infinite, I find God. This way of comprehending God comes to me with some difficulty. I would much rather believe that we each are a distinct, self-contained little unit. The reason that such a belief would be more comfortable for me is because I have been through times of crisis in my life when, due to faulty cognition, I took connectedness too far. I thought that I was interacting with people on many levels, subconscious as well as conscious, covert as well as overt. To put a finer point on it, I thought I was communicating psychically with others. As a result of this delusion, my sense of coherent identity was threatened. During these crises, the boundaries between myself and others seemed to blur and melt. Needless to say, I fell out of touch with reality, and it is with great humility and joy that I can say I'm much more stable now. My first step on the path to recovery from mental illness was to admit to myself that I was suffering from mental illness. The illness was obviously complex, but the gist of it was that I was mistaking my own thoughts and emotions with others, and also mistakenly thinking that my thoughts and emotions were broadcasting outward to others. Once I admitted to this understanding of what I was experiencing, that all the thoughts and emotions I was having were mine and mine alone, and that they were not broadcasting out of me for others to receive, I started healing. At first, I felt very fractured mentally into lots of itty-bitty pieces, each vying for control. Repairing this mental disintegration has been a process of putting myself back together into a whole individual, a process similar to depth psychologist Carl Jung's individuation, the process by which a person becomes a psychological individual, that is, a separate or indivisible unity or whole. I was excited when I found this term, this definition. Unity was exactly the healing I needed. And the more I strove to become mentally whole, the more I realized that mind and spirit are inextricably linked, that in order to be whole mentally, I needed to be whole spiritually as well. Spiritually, to me, being whole means being one with the greater whole, the whole, so to speak. My earnest thinking on the matter made me want to chisel the word separate out of Jung's definition and throw it away. Individual, yes. Indivisible unity, yes. Separate, no. I believe connectedness to the whole, which is God, to be infrangible, which is to say that it cannot be severed. Ideation of separation from God is, in my system, delusion. It is perhaps the single lie of which evil's entire bag of tricks consists, to delude one into the false cognition of isolation of the soul. Please keep in mind that I'm trying to heal into a whole, which means healing my soul as well as my mind. In thinking of soul and of sin, I turn first to the origins of the words in Greek. Soul, in Greek, is psyche, which also means breath. It is the animating force which distinguishes living beings from the inanimate. Do plants breathe? I'll not debate whether a tree has a soul. I'll focus rather on soul as breath. In my layman's conception, to breathe is to exchange molecules with the atmosphere. In the same way, the soul makes exchanges. It gives and takes. What is its atmosphere? I want to say it is the oversoul, a word used by Ralph Waldo Emerson. That great nature in which we rest as the earth lies in the soft arms of the atmosphere, that unity, that oversoul within which every man's particular being is contained and made one with all other. I hasten to point out that it is not this oversoul that I equate with God. It is the process of exchange between the individual soul and the oversoul, which is God. I repeat, the process of exchange. Connectedness to the whole, in action. Emerson's words are so brilliant, I cannot refrain from quoting more. We live in succession, in division, in parts, in particles. Meanwhile, within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal One. And this deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is all accessible to us is not only self-sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing and the thing seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one. We see the world piece by piece as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole, of which these are shining parts, is the soul. I find it fascinating how Emerson confounds binary thinking in this passage. We tend to think in terms of either or, either seeing or seen, either subject or object, either on or off. I've even heard it theorized that such binary thinking is hardwired into us, down to the all-or-nothing firing of our neurons. But here, Emerson goes beyond the concept of mutual exclusion, describing a whole which encompasses even polar opposites. He calls this whole the eternal One. Again, to my way of thinking, it is not this One which is God, but the connective action of the One, the breathing of the One. Breathing, aspiration, inspiration, and exhalation. Suggestive words. I'll take the metaphor one step further and say that with God there can be no asphyxiation. The Oversoul is always readily available for our individual souls to breathe. What then of sin? In believing that separation from God is mere delusion, the sham trickery of the enemy, am I then of the opinion that we can do no wrong? There are 7 or 8 Greek words for sin, of which perhaps the most all-inclusive is hamartia, an archery term I have read meaning to miss the mark. If to sin is generally to miss the mark, there is an implication worth noting that at least we were trying, notching the arrow, pulling back the bowstring, aiming. Maybe we didn't aim at the right target. To borrow from Buddhist teachings, or from Bruce Lee in the movie Enter the Dragon, we may have looked at the finger and not the moon it was pointing at. The true mark, the moon, is oneness, and not some permanent state of oneness which one may attain and hold or keep, but the forever ongoing process of being one with everything, the whole universe and all the nothing we imagine it to be expanding into. It's enough to tickle your funny bone when put like that, all the nothing. But this is where my thoughts go when I deliberate on the divine. Not to be distracted or seem to sidestep an important issue, I do believe that one can sin. When I think of the 7 deadlies, wrath, greed, sloth, pride, lust, envy, and gluttony, I think of them as tendencies which interfere with awareness of oneness. As I understand it, these 7 don't appear in the Bible as such, but are originally attributed to a 4th century monk. Turning to the good book, we find that in Proverbs, King Solomon gives us 6 things the Lord hateth, and the 7th his soul detesteth. 1. A proud look. 2. A lying tongue. 3. Hands that shed innocent blood. 4. A heart that devises wicked plots. 5. Feet that are swift to run into mischief. 6. A deceitful witness that uttereth lies. And 7. Him that soweth discord among brethren. I can't quite get my head around God literally hating or detesting anything, since I don't personify or anthropomorphize divinity into a deity per se. But again, these 7 from Proverbs seem likely to me to get in the way of being mindful and aware of being one with the whole. If you're proud, you're focused on not on oneness, but on self. To lie, kill, plot, instigate, or get into mischief is to eschew and fail to appreciate the beauty of truth. Truth, a word I hold to be practically synonymous with God. Not the truth, as in an objective reality, but truth-making, like creation in progress, truth-ing, perhaps. In Galatians 5:19-21, there's a longer list of sins. Adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revellings, and such like. St. Paul says that people who enact these sins shall not inherit the kingdom of God, so they are typically considered mortal sins. The first of these that jumps out at me is drunkenness, of which I have in my life been guilty maybe more than my fair share. I think of something my father said to me recently about having some drinks on Thanksgiving. A self-described agnostic, he is a man who values the sense of awe that the great mystery of existence instills in him. Enjoying conversation as entertainment, he and I throw around notions of God, puzzle over free will versus determinism, and other existential and metaphysical riddles. But about drinking on Thanksgiving, he said that this year he noticed that after a few beers, his sense of awe diminished. A great way, in my mind, of saying this: that he became less aware, less mindful and appreciative of God. If the kingdom of God can be interpreted as full and glorious oneness with the divine, then no wonder these mortal sins will keep you from it. They're either false targets, numbing, dumbing down influences, or they're like noise in the data, static on the line, interrupting a clear connection. Though I'll risk being repetitive to reassert, the connection cannot be completely broken, any more than one can escape the universe. One is always in the universe, and on the line with God. Speaking of Thanksgiving, giving thanks is a practice I embrace and make frequent and vigorous use of, as a kit of tools almost, wrenching myself into the present and hammering awareness into my head, which seems made of something hard, unyielding wood, full of knots and warps in the grain which lead me away from simple knowings like unity. Giving thanks for providence regarding basic needs like shelter and food, more complex gifts like the ability and opportunity to work and provide for myself to some extent, also the great privilege of driving, and scaling Maslow's pyramid for safety, for love and belonging, for self-esteem and self-actualization, or, to be more patriotic, for life, liberty, and the freedom to pursue happiness, for never having to go to war because of the progress hard won by generations before, and because of those who are presently serve in my stead, for modern medicine and sanitation, utilities and luxuries, art and literature and music. Praise the One in all its intricate glory and splendor, and joyful thanks be to God, for shining the sun and bringing the rain, mountaining the mountains and seeing the seas, allowing for my flush toilet and this logic engine on which to ponder and pray. Prayer. Prayer to me is deliberate thinking. So much day-to-day thinking is autonomic, thoughts coming and going like snatches of remembered song, sometimes racing like a runaway fruit cart, apples spilling off of the back and sides as it careers around, lurches through potholes, and runs along ruts. It behooves one, in my time-tested opinion, to take the reins and drive the cart once in a while, to gee and haw, cluck and whoa at the drays as they chomp at the bit, even to put them to pasture time and again, take up the yoke and pull the cart oneself. Prayer is like that for me, like pulling the cart, or guiding it deliberately around hazards and bypassing false paths. Deliberate thinking can be choosing the scenic route, consciously chancing risky terrain, keeping to a ponderous stately pace, or barreling along the well-paved main. It often ends in amen. So be it, truly. When I practice thinking deliberately, I often use mnemonic devices and familiar phrases and expressions, and even whole paragraphs or stanzas I've put together, designed to guide me to certain areas of interest or towards favorite landmarks or fertile fields for thought. An example of a mnemonic I use is the word holistic, the meaning of which I have yet to grasp, but suspect to be of crucial importance. At any rate, I've ascribed a thought to each letter of the word holistic, and the thoughts go something like this. H. Housed, clothed, and fed. O. Okay with the past, the present, and the future. L. Learning and healing. I. The I recedes. S. The self becomes systemic. T. The Tao. I. Individuation. C. Continuing to learn and to heal. Which course of thoughts, optimally lingering to consider and elaborate on each, I usually follow with this little recursive personal mantra. One being becoming more fully aware of being one being, becoming more fully aware of being one being, becoming more fully aware of being one. and around that cycle of 8 words for some time, trying to fully absorb and ingrain in myself the process they entail, aka God. Meditation, on the other hand, I experience as mental and spiritual effort in the direction of stopping the apple cart altogether, or maybe getting off and striding serenely alongside. I've had the most success with a style akin to Zazen, just sitting, though I can't claim to have the knack for it really. Sometimes I try to detach from my thoughts, to kick back as it were and simply observe them as they come and go. When this endeavor is working, a thought like, "I'm hungry," or just "hunger," will arise and evaporate without my actually feeling hunger and without allowing the thought to begin a chain of related thoughts, such as what I might eat, where, and how soon. Another meditation I've got a little experience with trying is permitting a really large, meaning-laden thought just to hang, sort of, in the space of my mind. The Tao, for instance, or just Tao. This feels edifying and calming and kind of like having a full belly, and is especially convenient because for all the times I've perused translations of the Tao Te Ching, and even tried my hand at phrasing its profound poetry myself, I can never seem to recall the wording of a passage from it, just vague imprints such as, "The Tao that can be told is not the true Tao," or, "In thinking, keep to the simple," such like that. It occurs to me that I might be more successful with meditation if I weren't such an ardent tobacco smoker. Invariably, I crave a pause for that cause, and my sense of detachment or of having a full belly passes like gas. Once, while traveling in Northeast Asia, I attended a martial arts retreat. The art was called Gi Chun, Korean for Chi or life force, and sky or heavens. The practitioners made great spinning flourishes and cycled through elaborate sequences of movement which reminded me of sun salutations in Tai Chi. I told the master, who was guiding me through some of the more basic static and moving poses, only the most fundamental of which has stayed with me through the many years since, that I was interested in meditation. That night, as I bedded down in a charming, austere little octagonal hut, there in the mysterious ancient mountains of the Far East, the master brought me a book to aid me in my pursuits. Meditation for Dummies in English. Flipping through the book, greatly amused, I found a little meditation entitled, I seem to recall, "Find the Beauty." It struck me as a worthy pursuit to pause in any given place and time to search out something of beauty and contemplate it. I should do this more often. I vividly recall that Gi Chun master's laugh. He laughed like James Earl Jones.